Today, we're diving into the story of a place that promised health, but actually delivered something far more sinister. It's the story of the man behind one of America's most famous brand names and his secret, absolutely terrifying obsession.
So picture this, the Battle Creek Sanitarium. On the surface, it's this glamorous health spa, a luxury wellness resort for America's rich and famous. But what was going on behind closed doors? Well, its celebrated director, Dr. Harvey Kellogg, had a mission that had very little to do with health and everything to do with horror. You see, his one all-consuming goal was to get rid of sex. Yeah, you heard me right. To wipe out human sexuality, once and for all. And he was willing to do it by any means necessary, turning his fancy health spa into a personal lab for some of the most horrific experiments you can imagine. And that brings us to his so-called cures. I'm using that word very loosely here, because honestly, they sound a lot more like something out of a medieval torture chamber than a doctor's office. So what exactly was he doing to people? You know, these wealthy, unsuspecting patients who checked in looking for a health boost. Well, brace yourself, because the answers are genuinely shocking. For young boys, his go-to surgery was just unbelievably brutal. He insisted on performing circumcisions without any anesthesia. And it wasn't because he didn't have access to it. Oh no. The reason was much, much crueler. He literally believed the trauma was the cure. He says it right here, that the pain would have a salutary effect, which is a fancy way of saying a beneficial one. In his twisted mind, if the pain was bad enough, the boy would be so mentally scarred that he'd never, ever want to touch himself again. The pain was the point. Now, if you think that's bad, listen to his method for grown men. It was just as horrifying. He came up with a procedure that involved a needle and silver wire to literally sew the foreskin shut. I mean, just listen to how he describes it. It's so cold, so mechanical. This wasn't about medicine. It was about brutal physical control, enforced through mutilation. Can you even imagine checking into a spa for your health and leaving like that? And it wasn't just men and boys. His treatments for women were equally monstrous. He recommended applying pure carbolic acid, that's a corrosive, flesh-burning chemical, directly to the clitoris. And he called this an excellent method. The whole point was to chemically burn away any possibility of pleasure. In his view, that was a medical victory. It's just unbelievable. Okay, so you have to be asking, why? Why was he so obsessed with all this? Well, let's dive into the bizarre philosophy that was behind every single horrific thing that happened at his sanitarium. So at the heart of it all was this idea he called vital energy. He was absolutely convinced that every person had a limited, finite supply of life force, like a battery that couldn't be recharged. And any sexual activity, even just a thought, would drain that precious battery, making you sick and damning your soul. And he wasn't quiet about these wacky ideas. Nope. He wrote a whole book about it, just 2 years after taking over the sanitarium. It was basically his personal manifesto, a declaration of war against pleasure itself. But he had one particular obsession that topped all the others. He called it self-pollution, which was his term for masturbation. To him, this was public enemy number one, the single greatest threat to all of humanity. And just look at the list of things he claimed it caused. It's absolutely wild. We're talking everything from acne and blindness to full-blown insanity, and then, yep, eventual death. He was literally inventing medical horror stories to justify his moral crusade. So his whole twisted worldview really boils down to 3 simple rules. 1. Sex is dangerous and masturbation is a death sentence because it drains your vital energy. 2. The secret to fighting these urges is a bland diet. Flavorless food, like crackers and cereal, was key. And 3. The only reason for sex is to make babies. That's it. No pleasure allowed. So the big question is, right, did the guy who preached all this actually live by his own incredibly extreme rules? Did he practice what he preached? Well, publicly, he absolutely did. He told everyone he had never once had sex, that he was a perfect model of celibate purity. But there was just one little catch. He had a wife. And he wasn't just married to anybody. His wife, Ella Eaton, was a genius, a super gifted nutritionist who was the valedictorian of her university at just 19 years old. They met when she came to work for him at the sanitarium. And their honeymoon? Oh, it was about as romantic as you'd expect. Apparently, they spent the whole trip, get this, rereading his book together. And that's where he convinced his brilliant new bride that sex was a dangerous health hazard that they needed to avoid for their entire lives.
And she was all in. She put that nutrition degree to work as the head chef at the San, becoming the true architect of Kellogg's whole anti-sex food empire. She was the one who developed all these bland recipes, specifically engineered to make sure nobody eating them would get any, exciting ideas. And that's the whole point, isn't it? That a simple, bland breakfast food that so many of us grew up eating was literally invented as a weapon in a fanatical war on pleasure. It just makes you wonder what other secrets are hiding behind our most familiar brand names. So I guess the only question left is, next time you pour yourself a bowl of cereal, are you going to see it the same way?